evening to you, George. Evening, Sam. And we're excusing Sam today. He's leaving us to steer the ship. He had conflicting assignments today, so George and myself will try and steer the ship. I'm good, George. How are you?
Very, very well. Looking forward to a very, very, very interesting subject on self-leadership. Really excited to be steering the ship today with you on this one.
Yes, I just want to welcome the listeners to the show. Some of our other colleagues who normally join our Tuesday edition of the digital online streaming mastery program of Cometsa, the Train the Trainer edition, will probably join us in a bit of time. But until then, we will continue and provide the content that we usually do as Cometsa. Cometsa Radio follows a philosophy of the mind, the journey, and the destiny. We apply our mind to the journey that takes us to our destiny, and we follow the concept of idea. We inform and entertain, we develop and educate, we empower and support, we associate and network. That's the idea. Welcome once again to the listeners. I am Divesh Motilal, a resident DJ at Kometsa Radio and an engineer by trade. And I'll allow uh, my colleagues to introduce themselves before we dive into the topic of tonight's show. Over to you, George.
Right. And welcome to the listeners. Thank you very much for joining us once again. As I said, today's subject is pretty deep. I love it. Self-leadership and being in control. It's always good to get different views on this one. And I'm hoping that we will get a lot of activity in the chat. I'm a coach by training. My day today is executive coaching. I work with leaders. I also do professional speaking, keynotes, and I'm an author. I published a book on goals and goal setting, and it's a subject that I'm pretty interested in. As we end the year, I think there's 49 days, I think, to the end of the year. And so if you haven't started on your goals, this is the time to do it, your goals for 2025. Welcome. We will discuss the subject in detail.
Thank you, George. Let's give Ompile a chance. He's also on the virtual studio, a chance to introduce himself to the listeners. Over to you, Ompile.
Thank you, Dr. Divesh, and welcome the listeners. And yes, my name is Umpile. For me, I'm also quite interested in the topic of today because it kind of dive into uh, people knowing themselves. I'm a passionate believer in purpose and people living with a purpose. So I believe that the session today shall engage in that in terms of identifying self-leadership. And I also love what George said in terms of goal setting. It's a good reminder for us to start actually setting down our goals and also evaluating the ones that which we set at the beginning of our year. So thank you. And I hand it over to you, Divesh.
Thank you, Ompile. Yes, indeed. As George was alluding, tonight we are getting closer to our 40 modules, which are focusing on the digital online streaming mastery program, which Cometsa is offering. Tonight we're on Unit 37, Conduct 32, and our focus for tonight is on self leadership and being in control. When we speak of self leadership, it's always important, I think, that we at least define what are we talking about when we say self leadership. And the Kometsa definition that we're looking at is self leadership involves influencing one's thinking, feelings, and behavior towards achieving personal success. And of course, that's a loaded definition. But I think let's open up our discussion tonight with looking at some of the personal anecdotes that might illustrate the transformative power of self-awareness in our own leadership journey. If I can reach out to my co-host George, if he can also share with the listeners some of the anecdotes that you've had in your personal life in terms of transformative power of self-awareness.
Right. Yeah. Well, just to confirm what you said, that self-leadership is the practice of intentionally, I think that's the word, intentionally influencing our thoughts, behaviors, and emotions to achieve personal and professional goals. And this involves taking responsibility, really, for all our actions and setting clear objectives. And even with those clear objectives, we need the discipline, right? And the motivation to do it. So, to your question, the key components around that will be self-awareness. Self-awareness is what? Understanding strengths and weaknesses, recognizing what your abilities are, what are the areas that need improvement, what is the impact of my actions on other people. Uh, you know, when I do my coaching, one of the things I always look for is the client's understanding of self, your strength and the weaknesses. Because I know in the old days there was an adage that say, "Oh, we'll look at for your weaknesses and try and develop them." But you see, when your weaknesses, when you develop them, at best you become average, right? But if you work on your strengths, now you're going to shine. And so, understanding what your strengths are, placing absolute weight on those, and creating a future based on your strength gives you the ability to improve exponentially. I don't know what your comments are. If I look at my own background, my background is law and people, and so in working at my strength, it has to be subjects around people, subjects around that. That is what will make me shine. I wouldn't be the IT engineer uh, because that's not my strength. But being aware of that is critical.
Indeed, George, I fully agree with you that the importance of self-awareness is, impactful in terms of your self-leadership journey. And indeed, it's a journey. We got to know that it's an ongoing process of self-improvement and development. And indeed, you got to set the tone as well in terms of how you want to develop yourself personally,
Mhm.
what commitment that you want to actually put towards that self leadership development. And the self awareness impact, as you rightfully outlined, it's definitely looking at how individuals can develop self awareness. And you got to explore what are the benefits of understanding one's strengths, their weaknesses, and definitely how you can use your own self awareness to influence your own decision making. Would you like to input on those points at this point, Ompile?
Yes, I would like to agree also, and I would also like to look at it from that perspective of saying, how does one become self-aware? Because I think self-awareness it's also influenced by a lot of things. Before someone creates their their goals, I feel like being aware and being conscious, it's something that maybe also needs to be, maybe discuss maybe because, for example, if someone would grow up in maybe an example, I will make a typical example about David from the Bible. He grew up as a shepherd. He never had envisioned himself as maybe one of the king of Israel, for example. And because of the conditions that he was in, he couldn't become aware of maybe himself. So I think that's something also maybe we need to ask. But as for me, I think that's something that also the listeners maybe might be interested in because, someone says you be conscious of yourself, but indeed, to be conscious of yourself, it takes a lot of time and, a lot of efforts. Like that George already said, it's something that is more intentional to get to that point. But yeah, I totally agree that once someone is being conscious of themselves or being aware of themselves, then they can be able to identify their strength and work more on their strength, just like David was able to work on their strength, playing an instrument and also being mentored. So I feel like that was something that maybe he could see in terms of being conscious first that yes, I can be a king, and after that, developing his strength towards that goal. So that's maybe my taking of the introduction.
Mm. Yeah. Can I just add on that? The intentionality aspect of it. When we say be intentional. So you can go look for a coach to work around that. But being intentional literally means sitting down and study yourself like a book. Go through yourself, and some people have this habit of journaling. If you can journal, what are the things that trigger me? When am I happy? When am I excited? What are the things that I look forward to? All those things, that whole composite, creates a picture for you from where now you can distill to say, these are my strengths. Because I was reading this afternoon about a state of flow. People call it in the zone. What are the things that when you are doing them, you are in a state of flow? You are in the zone. You don't even notice that time has passed. You're doing this, you love. That will be a strength. Those things that you can be in a state of flow for are the things that you must then begin to recognize. So now then you know what are your intentions, knowing your values. What are your values? And being aware what can keep you from becoming a good leader. Because sometimes you realize that maybe I have a short fuse. Let's put it that way. My temper is not quite right. And that will keep you away from being a good leader. But if you recognize that, then you can do something about it.
Yes, I like that point you're raising, George, and it does indeed lead on from Umpile's anecdote that he had also shared with the listeners. Of course, once you get to a positive mindset, which is where we would all like to be, we often face setbacks and criticisms. What would you say is some of the motivational factors that we could express in terms of self leadership development? And I know you did touch on a couple of them already, George. But can we look at other factors that we could help our listeners to improve in terms of their self leadership journey?
Yeah, I think we touched a bit on goal setting, so we'll jump a little bit. But self motivation is probably one of the most intrinsic motivations that you can get. Finding the internal drivers that keep you motivated. Because, I think most of us in this modern day of action and media and everything, we tend to seek motivation from external sources, If I watch this, if somebody says this to me. But self-motivation coming from internal drivers, understanding yourself to say, how can I motivate myself? How can I get myself from where I am to where I want to be? And staying resilient, because every goal you're going to face setback. Whatever goal you set, you are going to get a setback. how do you stay resilient? And we're going back to understanding self there. So writing down what keeps me motivated. So that's a big one for me. Self-regulation is also another. The discipline really to practice self-control, maintain focus on my goals. That that's a tricky one, because there are too many things that come in our way to derail our plans. But the discipline to say, I'm staying. And this is why I recommend finding a mentor, working with a coach, or just getting an accountability partner, David. Somebody you say, okay, these are my goals. This is not a coach or anything, but he keeps you on track when the going gets tough. It's that I don't. Yeah, it's good to say coach, but it can be anyone who keeps you accountable.
Indeed, and I think it's important that a individual in their journey of self leadership development, they identify those traits, those sources of both internal and external motivators. Like you also rightfully said, those factors do influence your self leadership. They You need to identify what are those that for yourself is your motivation factors, and then create a system of rewards and incentives that can drive those positive actions. I mean, you must also identify that there's both negative as well as the positive actions. Once you identify those, you decide as well what the path is going to be. And it's always good. I mean, programs such as digital online streaming mastery, Kometsa's offering to the participants, to listeners, we do touch on the do's and don'ts, and these are the things that can actually help you identify what is it that's your own motivator. And of course, when we talk self leadership, we have to obviously touch on behavior. I mean, leadership, sometimes people can say people are born natural leaders, but I believe that anybody can be a leader as long as you would change your behavior towards that of a leader, not only on the external environment where you are dealing with other people, but also within yourself, so that you can come out in a natural way to be seen as a leader. When we talk of behavior, what are some of the modifications you think and the practices that uh, listeners can go on or utilize? You touched on a few of them in terms of having a potential coach. What other things that we could do to stay away or modify those negative behaviors?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, well, before I go to there, let me mention a third component, because it's going to be tied up to what I'm saying. Third component of self leadership, and this is self-efficacy. That belief, believing that whatever comes your way is something that you can handle. The belief that you can succeed in specific situations or accomplish tasks, because it's something that you need to build in as a behavior. Dervish. Uh, all too often, people wilt at when the going gets tough. Now, people with higher levels of self-efficacy believe that they can succeed, even though the going looks terrible. But you can build that. I don't believe. Yes, it could be something you're born with, but you can actually build that by modeling your behavior around a specific individual, specific things that you want to achieve. So, as in terms of behaviors, building a high level of self-efficacy, building a high level of, yes, I can do it. Yes, I can do it. Initially, when you start saying those things, you may actually sound silly. You may think, who am I fooling? But the more you say, self-affirmations, I'm sure all of our listeners at one stage or other, you do self-affirmations in front of the mirror, etc. And you realize that with time, the more you repeat that, the more you say it to yourself, the more you actually begin to believe it and begin to live it. And so this is a behavior self-efficacy where you can actually begin to believe that you can do it. And as a result, actually succeed because of that belief.
You want to add anything on to that point, Ompile?
Yes, I also agree that also, like, for someone to be remain, because I believe that in the world there will always be, forces that are like negative, especially to the mind. And like that day George was saying that, you have to keep yourself more positive than negative. So I feel like the important thing is, yes, on your own you can try to be always positive, but at some point, there's a saying that for you to achieve goals, you will need something like advisors, or I would say something like positive people around you. So, or maybe messages or anything that is of positive in life. Because sometimes, yes, people do can shut down, but as long as they are able to identify what, like you said, what maybe gives them joy. For example, it doesn't necessarily has to be another person, but most of the time, I feel like it's very important to maybe listen to good messages, because I know we have religious leaders, different type of religious leaders that always try to speak a lot of positive things to people so that people are energized. And also coaches, you know, uh, having a coach is a very important thing. I think it's a very good asset for everyone to have, and maybe family members. So I feel like they should be somewhere, even maybe sports or anything that you maybe like, but something that can help in terms of whenever you are negative, and especially getting good, positive, I mean, people around you. So I think maybe that's maybe another element that we can add to that, so that you can be able to achieve your goal. Because yeah, that's something that I believe is very, very, very important
No, I
from my
think I
side.
think I do agree with you as well, Mpile, that the world can be filled with distractions, especially when we speak of digital online streaming. With all the different modules that we've dealt with thus far, we would find that each one actually supports the other modules, and the dynamics behind having an online show, the selection of the channel that you want to put your show on, the selection of the guests, what your show is going to be about, how you're going to plan all the consequential shows that you'd have. All of those elements, you definitely need to be able to develop your own self leadership and overcome some of these distractions. And one of the mechanisms, or some of the mechanisms that we've discussed thus far, we talk about getting support from external parties, external systems, family members, community leaders, and the like. But I think it's also very important that you, as an individual, learn as much as possible about yourself. You should be the person who knows yourself the best. Uh,
Mm,
and in parallel, of course, you reach out to others who may be able to point out to you certain things that you may know about yourself, some things you may not know about yourself. But one of the other modules, we did touch on this aspect of setting goals, and I think developing self leadership goals, focusing on those goals, and trying to effectively achieve those goals. That's something very important as well on your journey of self leadership. I think maybe yourself, George, if you could touch on some of the tips in terms of setting and achieving goals effectively.
Yeah, thank you. Let me get to that, but before I wander into that territory, let me just comment on that positivity Mpile was referring to. That
Yes.
you really need to be positive. And I know these days there's a lot of what is this term called? It's called toxic positivity, isn't it? When people say, "Oh, you know, don't be so positive that you ignore reality," in quotes. You must temper your positivity with realism. There's a yes and a no to that, in my view, and I'm speaking for myself here. That the people, if you look at the history of the people who have achieved the greatest successes, they've sort of achieved the impossible. They haven't let realism, in quotes, get in the way. And I know I'm going to have a lot of people saying, well, but, because sometimes if you're going to set goals, in one of the courses that we teach, one of the programs I teach, we talk about three types of goals. The A-type goal, the B-type goal, the C-type goal is the big, hairy, audacious goal, the B-hug, big, hairy, audacious goal. That's the goal that it scares you. You literally don't even think you'd achieve it. And you don't even know how you're going to achieve it when you set it. But you must stay positive and say, I'm going to do it. And it is that kind of goal that if you temper it with realism, I think I've mentioned this on this program before. When I was a young man, I wanted to be a lawyer, but we were poor. There was absolutely nowhere I was going to be. But the point was, I stuck to it. I stuck to it despite everything that came my way, and I achieved the goal. So sometimes I know toxic positivity. Yes, don't be too be realistic in some extent, but realism actually has a numbing effect on people who are really aggressively looking at achieving goals. You want to dream and dream big. Okay, so I've rendered a bit on that because I really do worry a lot about people who say, "Oh, every time be realistic," because you will never achieve great things if you're going to do that. There's times where you think of something so big, you have no idea how you're going to do it, but you must go for it. That is the only way you will succeed. All right. So what are some of the goals? So when we're setting goals, we're talking about SMART goals, right? Specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, they're time bound. Most people struggle with goals because they do not set times. And sometimes you set a goal that's too big, and you lose heart when nothing happens. And what we recommend is cut it into bite-sized little thing. One little step, and celebrate that. The next little step, celebrate that. The next little step. That's how you achieve big goals. You don't start from zero to a big goal. It's all little steps along the way, and celebrate them and be clear that each step leads to the next step. Mhm. Yeah, I don't know what you think, Mpile. Hello?
Yes, I totally agree. Setting goals and smart goals, like you said, at this time of the year, it is the year where like a good time to start setting goals for 2025. And I think this is very applicable to what you said in terms of making sure that you are setting the goals that you will be able to measure. I think one of the most important things is like something that you can be able to measure. I know when I was doing my MBA, most of my lectures would always emphasize that everyone who is a leader must be able to measure what they want to get to. Because if you
Yeah.
don't have if you have goals, but you are not able to have a metric towards achieving that goal, that means you are just setting unrealistic goals, but at least have a measure to say, maybe, I don't know, someone, if, for example, as a runner, say I want to run in marathon, you need to have those measures. I think measures will be the ones that can also motivate you towards achieving that specific goal. And yeah, I think it's very important, and people don't take this very serious about setting goals and writing them down actually on a paper or on a laptop, and to be always seeing them, being conscious and being aware of those goals. I think that's something that is important. And also, I like the fact that you mentioned that um, when someone makes a goal, and it's normally they say when your goal scares you, that means something maybe that's more aligned to your purpose than if it's not scaring you. Because one person said that your purpose, it must be something that scares you. If you look at also, like, I always like to reflect on the book, on the book. So if you look at also David, when they told him that maybe, for example, you're gonna be a king, he was totally, it's something that he would never ever thought of being. And it was something that was, how can I achieve that goal? But through mentorship and also through him also being aware and being conscious that this is a goal that I have to achieve, and I'll be patient towards this goal. He had to take his time and also put some measures to make sure that actually he becomes closer to the team, and somehow to be able be able to actually achieve his goal. So already he had that type of a goal setting, but he was scared. He was like, no, 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 make a mistake, not me. So I think, yeah, that's something that I also appreciate. I like, being positive, and also the uh, goals and really visions.
Thanks, Umpile, for the contribution. And I agree with you and as well with George. Goal setting is paramount. Focusing on positive behaviors is essential for self esteem. And of course, to be able to achieve the goals, we got to identify the and avoid the negative behaviors while we are setting our goals, and also while I think while we're setting goals, we must not forget that we need rewards as well as punishment to also help us along the journey of achieving the goals. So we got to have incentives, both self-initiated ones, intrinsic, as well as some extrinsic rewards that can drive our behavior towards the positive. And positive negative punishment can also help us reduce some of the undesirable behaviors. So it's important as well that as we're setting these goals, and as George loves articulating it, smart goals, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Once we get ourselves into that rigmarole, and we get used to setting them and trying to achieve them according to that specific sort of recipe, people will start to see the positives coming through. But that being said, I mean, we've experienced it in our personal lives, in our professional lives. And of course, when we are talking to listeners that would be going on the journey of online streaming, you are going to come across times in that journey where you're struggling with negative self talk,
Mm,
and you're
mm.
finding it difficult to maintain your positive mindset. And I mean, let's be realistic and honest. I mean, it's not always as easy as following the recipe. Sometimes life happens, and we have to deal with it. And sometimes as well, we don't necessarily have those avenues where we can go to leaders or turn to somebody. We got to have to reach out within ourselves into that self leadership pool, and be able to get ourselves out of that rut and focus onto the positives again. What are some of the things that we can share with the listeners in terms of being able to uh, to get out of that negative self-talk and being able to maintain that positive mindset? What are some of the things that they can practice in their lives, in their careers, that can help them with that aspect? George?
Yeah, by staying positive. Well, it starts really with establishing and working on your purpose. So you are very clear what your purpose is, and then once you're clear, then try and focus on the things that make you happy. What that does is it reduces the level of negativity. And as we said in this afternoon, we were talking, be passionate, brave, and optimistic. Always be optimistic. I know, it's hard when the going gets tough to have a healthy positivity. But when you believe in yourself, and for me, this is the key. When you believe in yourself that you will actually achieve this, it will take a mountain of negativity to dampen your enthusiasm. But you have to create that level of self-talk, taking full responsibility for your actions, making every effort to remind yourself, why did I start this thing? I talk of business people who the business is failing, and why did I start my business? What was the reason for starting the business? Because that always gets you to kickstart yourself from a negative space. I don't know what do you say, Davis?
Yeah, I
I
love. Go ahead, Ompile.
sorry. Yes. I also want to I think also for me it would be also if someone is maybe because they say we currently live in the VUCA world where there is a lot of uncertainties that happen around us, and especially people are like professionals and also they are having you know crisis in their professional life, and also they're having crisis maybe in their personal space. Sometimes they can be a lot of issues, but I think anything that confuses you or that distracts you from achieving your goal, it's very. I think it needs maybe sometimes I would say people also sometimes need to realize they are human, and sometimes to lay back a bit, to rest, to take maybe off, and to be able to try and connect to themselves. Maybe I don't know other because I remember in another session we spoke about. I think we're talking about chakras and how you are able to deal with a lot of things. So maybe other people would go to nature. Other people would maybe do sport. Other people would do something they like. But also, I think the other important thing is having good messages around you. Like, for example, the show that we're having now, Cometa Show, so radio. So listening to such information, because whenever someone is in the dark, the only thing that they can do is to not think about the darkness, but to be able to get some light somewhere. So if you are in the problems and then you keeping you're not achieving your goals, and it's a bit hard. I think it's always good to always try to, as much as you can, listen to positive things as possible than always trying to be hard on yourself and saying I want to achieve this thing, but realize that you're human. Take a break and be able to gain strength and then come back again for those goals. So that's maybe something that I can put in.
You mentioned self-talk? Did you, Davis? Because I find self-talk really very, very useful. If you practice it, you want to focus on developing better self-talk. All of us have that little inner voice. Each of us listening here will have something that says, "Hey, you are the most useless thing," and etc., etc. and practice listening to it. I think I can't remember her name now. She says that when that voice comes, don't try and completely dismiss it. So give it a name. So if that voice comes, call it Mike or something. Oh, Mike, you're back. I don't want to listen to you. But put create a situation where it doesn't have control over you, because positive talk makes you feel good about yourself, whilst negative self-talk makes you feel bad. I play sport, and one of the things I do is play golf. And I can tell you, every golfer will go out there, they have 3 or so bad shots, and they're literally calling themselves names until the end. But the guys who win are the guys who are able to talk themselves out of that rut which they have gotten themselves into. So whether you are in business or it's a family relationship, etc., you hear people saying, "Oh, I'm never good enough for anything in this home." But there's nobody who's never good enough for anything. There will be things that you're good at. There's things you're bad at. Be able to to give yourself positive talk. Look where you are now from where you were. I told you that we were poor. So when things get really bad for myself, I always get back and say, but you know what, my brother, you've moved from where you were. And that alone helps to pull me up. And everybody has got something like that. Use that, because it makes you feel better. It boosts your confidence, helps you with your self-esteem. And self-talk is really good, but use it positively. Don't let that little voice mistreat you, as I like to say. Make it run every time it shows up.
Yes, and I think your point is extremely relevant, especially in this day and age of being online for majority of the time, and you don't necessarily have a real life person next to you to pick you up when things are not going your way. If it's of paramount importance, the positive self talk is definitely essential for self esteem and well being, and I love the point that you did raise, the locus of control, the belief in one's ability to control events. That's your internal locus. And then your perception of external factors as controlling affects your self leadership. That ability to at least try to control the situation is something that's also of importance within the self leadership journey. Another thing that Ompile, as well as yourself, George, mentioned, which I think I should re emphasize, is very simple. The aspect of happiness, prioritizing your happiness and your fun definitely contributes to a fulfilling life, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your personal life, even if you think of your shows that you're going to put together for your online streaming. If you're not happy about what you're doing, then you're definitely doing the thing that you should not be doing.
Right.
Uh, it's something, of course, happiness is sometimes elusive, but it's something, as we say, we're setting smart goals. These are the elements which I think is important when you set your goals to make sure you're taking care of these. Sometimes you think they're small things, but at the end of the day, they end up being the things that actually matter in your life. Something you also mentioned, Umpile, fitness, diet, sleeping. Those are simple things that people sometimes forget to take care of. These are foundational elements of your physical and your mental well being. And if you want to find happiness, if you want to deal with a difficult situation, you got to get those basic things right. Another thing you did touch on as well, George, is that of stress management. You got to develop strategies to cope with your stress. That's definitely essential again for your well being. And something we also mentioned in our other shows, and we went a bit deeper into it. But again, like we've said in our previous shows, all these modules were carefully constructed by Kometsa so that each one builds upon the other and they actually are synergistic to one another. to help people on this difficult journey of being able to do things such as develop their self awareness. So, emotional intelligence, also very important. That's your ability to perceive, to understand, reason with, and manage emotions. And that's definitely also key to your self leadership. When we start also looking in terms of, uh, when we talk about failure, because we're talking about difficult situations, and sometimes we are afraid
Mm, mm.
that with the failure, that will be it for us. We're never going to be able to get, off from or up from that failure. But sometimes what we need to look at is how does that play in the terms of the process of self leadership? How can we reframe some kinds of setbacks
Mm.
and turn those into opportunities of growth? Is there some nuggets that you could share as well, George, with the listeners in
Yeah,
terms of?
I
Yeah, go ahead.
really, yeah, self leadership is really understanding yourself, right? Motivating yourself, being self aware, self efficacy. But failure, as we all know, is a part of life, a necessary part of life. I always say to people, because you don't waste failure. Learn from it. What could I have done better from here? What are the lessons emerging from this? Everybody has failed at something. I did a television show once, which I called "Don't Crown Your Circumstances." You see, don't crown your failure and make it king. Look at it as one of those things on my journey through life that I learned from. Don't make it king. Don't crown failure. Understand it for what it is. It's there to help you grow and become better. Now, once you adopt that attitude, you will see failure for what it is. All of us have failed. I could mention a number of things that I failed at, but it would be a waste if I didn't learn from them. And so, what I would like to tell our listeners is to say, don't get into a tantrum because you failed. Sit back and say, what is the lesson here? What am I learning from it? What am I being taught here? And then move forward with that, knowing that next time this thing happens, these are my reactions. And so learn to be, shall we say, gracious, forgiving of yourself. Because when you make a mistake, we tend to be very hard on yourself. Forgive yourself. Give yourself slack, as they say. But understand that that failure is meant to make you a better person. So self leadership is then when you reframe that failure as an opportunity to learn and become better. But remember this: if you don't forget anything, don't crown your mistakes. Don't crown your failures. They are nothing but little lessons on the journey to your greatness.
And I think as well, when we speak of crowning our failures, we're also touching on the aspect of finding balance. If you start to crown the failures, then of course you've lost balance. And that balance that we refer to is healthy balance between your work, your personal life, your well-being, and of course that relates as well to your digital online streaming uh, um, environment as well, because life doesn't stop while you're doing your planning for your show and you're interviewing your guest. Even if something goes wrong there, you still need to balance out that
Right.
learning opportunity, where I see failure as a learning opportunity, as well as the rest of your life. And that is, in essence, I think, as well, inculcated in what self leadership is about, finding that balance between work, personal life, and well being. What would you say some of the, you wanted to come in there, Ompile?
Yes, yes, thank you, Divesh. I also, just before I come in, I think you also identified something very important about, I think, is emotional intelligence, and I think also that the George also mentioned it when we started, like understanding what triggers you, and also understanding the emotions that maybe you trigger to people. And I think that's something that is also important in terms of being aware of being self leadership. So that's was something that I also took. And regarding, I think, failure, I think one person also said that, sometimes if you make a goal and you don't achieve it, it's not the end of the world. It's just a matter of you did your best, and like what that day George said, you learn something from doing your best, and when you do it again, because your goal will be a goal, it's just like a vision of a company. If a company doesn't achieve their financial budget or their financial goal, it doesn't mean the company stops, but it will continue running until maybe the next financial year. Then that's where they will also try to achieve maybe that particular goal. But during the failure, I think the thing that is very negative is when people start to think too much about their failure, especially in their mind, that it becomes a constant thing that I failed, I failed, I failed, I failed, I failed, but not realizing that actually I learned, and I can maybe try to channel this this failure into something that can be a bit positive. So I think maybe that's something that I also pick up, that we don't have to dwell too much on the failing, not to achieve the goal as much as we set the goal, but to focus more on trying to say that we learned, and this is beyond our control. We are human, and let me try again to achieve it. So I think that's something I also picked up from the discussion.
Amen to that.
And I think
You know,
to your point as well, Umpile, if you've got a failure, it's not necessarily that you must immediately try to rectify that failure, and whether it's in a positive way or in a negative way. I think when you talk of balance again, you divert your attention and your energy towards something else which has got some positivity to it. So the dark cloud and the silver lining aspect could not necessarily be in that failure, but look at something else to just divert energy, regain your positivity in another activity, another area of your life, whether it's on the work side or personal life, or just being part of nature, to just recharge that energy within yourself, get that vibration of positive energy flowing inside yourself. Then you can go ahead and tackle the challenge that you were facing previously. What are some of the things that could also help in terms of balancing your work, your personal life, and your well-being?
um, well, even before I get there, let me mention one thing. And this is this. Once you decide to be a self leader, then you must act like one. That's imperative. I'm a self leader and I act like one. Why is that? But the importance of that is that your mindset now is talking to those your leadership abilities. So you must do everything possible to fulfill the role of a leader. Don't be content with where you are. I am a self leader, and so things about purpose, things we've talked about, happiness, etc. Once you have decided that this is the route I'm taking, then you must act like one. Don't go around behaving like a follower once you have decided to be a leader. All right. So, Dervish, you wanted to find out what was your question again?
Now, before we go back to the questions, George, I also wanted to reiterate your point that you raised. Indeed, we've mentioned it as well, that self leadership is really about intent, and action is needed. You got to turn that intent into reality. The self leadership is definitely not just about thinking; it's definitely about doing, and taking purposeful action, being mindful of the impact of your actions, and constantly striving to improve oneself. That's definitely something that helps you on the journey of self leadership. And I really like the point you raised that, being action driven, practicing new skills, developing positive habits, pushing yourself beyond your own comfort zone. That is what you need to do when you have become a, or you've of self-proclaimed yourself to be a leader. Those are also, of course, leading to the question that I had asked in terms of how can one balance the or find a healthy balance between work, personal life, and well-being. And of course, that balance is part of your inner core once you start on that journey of self-leadership.
Yes. Well, some people do. I think these days meditation has become quite big. Uh, when what are the things that you can do to relax yourself? A person like me, like my brother Mpuli there, we are very spiritual, and so we would spend time in the Word and all that. But whatever you do, the techniques that you do, exercise, for instance, we were talking this morning about sticking to a program. 5 a.m. one is up in the gym if you can. Uh, Wake out 2 hours, 1.5 hours, back at it, and start your day that way. Some people start with meditation, but create these habits for yourself. I do the exercise one. I'm up early. I do the running. I'm gymming. Um, and the reason is that's how you manage things like stresses and and once you make it a habit, it ceases then to be exercise and becomes a way of life. And that's where you want to get to, whether it's meditation, which is a way of life for you, exercising or prayer or whatever it is. Let it be a part of your life. It shouldn't be, oh, this is an external. No, it is an extension of who you are. And once you have established that, then you realize that now you're beginning to act like the leader that you want to be. You're creating positive habits that will determine your future.
You wanted to add to that, Opile?
No, I agree totally about I totally agree in terms of, making sure that you find things that channel you to be able to whatever that it is. For me, I know it's maybe, for example, just a run. And one thing that this time also mentioned that was very powerful is just to take a walk sometimes, and don't distract yourself with anything. Just a walk alone, that can also be something that is very powerful, I believe. So I totally agree with what that Tejo said. And also in terms of the point that he wrote about action, it was very powerful. And I think for any person to take actions, I believe that there will be a lot of mind shift or habit shift. So that's something that is also a bit difficult in terms of someone changing their habits to maybe in action orientated. So I think it's something that is also that I picked up in terms of, if you want to be a leader, if you decide to be one, it's a lot of things that maybe would one go through in terms of their mindset, because changing the mind, changing who you are, because the mind is what you are, what your actions and your behaviors and all those things, and also being disciplined. I think that's something that I also picked up, and it was something very, very powerful.
Mm.
Yes, that's something I.
So in coaching around this, we coach around what we call a healthy mind platter, and the healthy mind platter has seven components to it. We emphasize sleep. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, I need only 1 hour of sleep." Well, you're not doing yourself a favor. You literally need a minimum of 7, I think 7 hours. So you need sleep. You need physical time, a little bit of exercise, a little bit of exercise. You need focus time. I was talking earlier on about being in a state of flow where you focus to the exclusion of everything on something, whatever it is, whether it's making products or writing a book or whatever it is you focus on. Then connecting time. I don't. This is so important, folks. The human being is a connecting creature. We thrive on relationships. You can't be on your own all the time. So create the time for. That's why you find your Facebooks and all these Instagrams are popular, because people are looking for connection. But of course, that is plastic, right? Some of that on Facebook. But if you can connect with real people, create time deliberately, go visit a friend, invite somebody over to your place, then have play time to play. Whether it's with your little ones or whatever, play away from the work. Create downtime, where downtime is where I call it chilling time. You're doing nothing. You literally sit down and do 30 minutes of absolutely zero, and your mind is just wandering. That's good. That's very, very good. And then we do things like time in, exercising mindfulness, etc. But all these aspects are very intentional and deliberate. You have to do them for you to be the leader that you seek to be, and then to be in control. Because you can't be of any help to other people if you yourself are in bad shape, right? I think on the airlines they will say, "What is that? Put on your mask first before trying to help the passenger seated next to you." That's what it means. Be in a good state yourself before you start helping other people. So self-leadership is recognizing that and doing it.
And I would like to add as well, it's a very well articulated point you make, George, and we can't emphasize it more, enough to our listeners. The aspect of, no, I don't need, I don't need more than 2 hours sleep. You're definitely not doing yourself a favor. And your body, as much as it's connected on the outside, it's connected on the inside as well, where you start to condition your whole body to behave in a certain way, which may not necessarily be as good as you think it is for your own well-being. Indeed, the cornerstone of success is hinged around your own well-being. Self-leadership isn't just about achieving external success, it's also about nurturing your overall well-being. Like you rightfully said, George, it includes prioritizing physical, mental health, and activities that help. Definitely, for our listeners, doing a little bit of exercise, whatever the case may be. And exercise doesn't necessarily only mean going out and running and jogging and things like that. It could also be the new age thing of playing your online games, listening to music, taking the dog for a walk. It could be whatever. It's very adaptable. Having a balanced diet important, and definitely adequate sleep. Again, I mean, although we are promoting a program of digital online streaming, we do emphasize that we are encouraging balance between digital engagement and mental wellness. That is a huge challenge as well, especially for the youth, where there's a difficulty in balancing that digital engagement with that of the the tangible real world. Like you said, George, it's a bit of plastic relationships that we tend to build in the digital environment, and it's not necessarily good for our mental wellness. Self leadership definitely is about finding a harmonious balance between your professional pursuits and definitely your personal life. While we are striving towards that inner balance, we do have a challenge again that, unfortunately or fortunately, we have to engage with others around us, and that can have a negative impact as well as a positive impact on our self leadership abilities as well. What would you say are your thoughts on things like cultural diversity, inclusivity in workplace environments, even in our online streaming environments? We did talk on these aspects before. The aspect of cultural diversity, inclusion, uh, social responsibility, even in today's world, those aspects has a link to self leadership, and of course it influences your journey of becoming self leadership. What would be your points on those aspects, George?
Mm. It's a good thing you mentioned this thing around culture and social responsibility. Let's start with social responsibility because it means different things to different people. But I think the buzzword these days is ESG, isn't it? Environment, social, and governance. That's the big one. And you will see the differences in approach. That's where the culture comes in. I mean, they're in the US. They are not so big on it. They think it's everyone is going crazy, too crazy about climate change and all that. So they are less about it than Europe and the rest of the world, which says let's be more responsible. But depending on your locality, I think being mindful of things like climate change, being mindful about our social responsibility, how our behaviors as producers affect the communities around us, and consciously being alive and doing something about it. Now, I don't mean you need to go up and set up an NGO and all that. That's yeah. Some people can do that, but be at a place where if yours is, let's say climate change, that's your thing. Well, try and follow what is happening there as a leader and contribute as much as you can, whether it's by articles or attending meetings where these things are happening, but being conscious that I have a responsibility around this. And as I say, culture comes in now because there are cultures that are much more proactive in terms of things like that, and cultures which are much more conservative in relation to things like that. And there's no right or wrong, right? But a good leader understands the culture within which he operates and understands, shall we say, the norms, because being conscious of that allows you then to create goals and progress. Shall we say, use the word harmoniously in quotes there, because a leader is one who is not only aware of self but is aware of the environment around him and how self impacts that environment. And so, yeah, it's a big one. But there's an article I had on environment, how organizations were using that as a tick box exercise so that they look good to investors. Investors were saying we will only invest in companies that are active in areas of this, and they were tick box exercises, whereas on the ground they were not doing it. Now, good leaders don't do that. They do the real thing. Yeah, it's a very topical issue, and with the new generation now, they're saying we won't invest in organizations that discriminate. We want to invest in organizations that damaging the environment, etc., etc. And you need to be aware of them. You need to be aware of that.
Yes, indeed. You did touch on some of the aspects which I was thinking of as well in terms of, ethical leadership. That self leadership journey that you're on, as Kometsa, we would provocate you to be looking at developing ethical standards, whether it's for the environment, whether it's for good governance, whether it's for inclusivity of different cultural elements in your society, or even in the different demographics within the organization. If you're in a work environment or as a professional, or whether you're a business person serving a certain clientele, uh, being a corporate citizen, socially aware, having social intelligence, those are aspects which we have touched on in our other shows, and we're reinforcing again today when we talk of the journey on developing self leadership. Indeed, social intelligence, part of thereof is your emotional intelligence. Those are aspects also playing a key role in the governance, the ESG, as you mentioned, George. Even if you talk of the other frameworks which companies are utilizing, your sustainable development goals, they are looking at these aspects. And indeed, I agree with you. Sometimes it's a tick box exercise, but I don't think that will remain for in its entirety as we progress. Those are becoming more and more important, and they're having a impact on the societies and communities we live in. The world in its entirety is being affected by those aspects, and we can no longer claim to be a leader if you don't have some skills being developed in those areas. So your self leadership journey has to look at those aspects, and hence here at Kometsa we are emphasizing these aspects to try and build individuals that form communities with ethical values instilled in them. And one of the things as well I wanted to just emphasize on the point that you had made, George, when we're looking at self monitoring, it's an important aspect that one regulates themselves, they monitor what they are doing, take stock at the end of a day or end of the week in terms of what your behaviors have been. How did you adapt those behaviors to social situations? And of course, this type of self monitoring can be beneficial and should not, definitely not, compromise your authenticity. You got to be true to yourself, and you can't be just doing that tick box exercise as you mentioned, George. It's something that should be authentic about you and your self leadership skills. So I really enjoyed that point that you were making. So, and I wanted to emphasize
Mm.
that point once again. You have any? You wanted to add something in there, Ompile?
No, no, at the moment, I'm just listening. I think I also agree. I also like the point about, looking at the environment, especially now with this trends of a circular economy, whereby, they say you have to look at the environment, the people, the animals, and the environment. So I think that's something that is more common, becoming more common to everyone, especially with the resources that are so scarce and so limited. So I think that's maybe something that can be also common to everyone, especially if you're talking about different cultural environments. But yeah.
You mentioned something there, Devish, on reflection. Regularly reflecting on progress and making adjustments as needed. Something I mentioned around the healthy platter. I really want to emphasize that again. That because of the busy lives that we lead, we tend to then be activity driven. I must do this, do that, do that, do that, that. Everything is driven, then off to bed we go and up again, activity driven. And we don't create enough reflection time. So it's a practice that I would encourage. Some people are morning people, some people are evening people, whatever time. I know Sam was telling me, oh, he works late at night, which is fine. But that's where you want to create that 30 minutes or an hour, just to sit back and reflect on the progress of the things that you're doing. There will be failures there. There will be good things that you will pick up. There will be things that you will need to adjust. But just look at yourself as if it's somebody else looking at you, if you know what I'm trying to get at. Somebody looking at Devesh and saying, what has he done? But that's you sitting there and looking at that. Do that often enough and create that, because then you really look at yourself with of a discerning eye, for want of a better word. You're discerning eye. You're seeing the good things you're doing. You're seeing the things that are holding you back, and you're adjusting accordingly. Because leadership is all about adjusting as you go, bearing in mind the big goal that you have set. You've got your big goal there, your what they call it, your North Star, as they like to call it. But there are things that are coming your way. What are they? How are you seeing them? How do you deal with them? And in the process, continuous learning becomes important. Seeking opportunities for personal and professional development. As you said earlier, listening to this program, we learn. And I must tell the listeners that we learn as we do this. We're not experts at everything we talk about here, but we learn as we go. And we hear comments from you that said, about that. But it's you have to put yourself at a place where you are continuous learning, and then holding yourself accountable for your actions and outcomes. So you're reflecting, you see things aren't going too well. Don't look for the nearest excuse. Take responsibility. I'm responsible for my success. I'm responsible for anything that happens. Take responsibility, because the moment you take responsibility, you are forced to take action. Don't point fingers around at everybody around you. Focus on going forward. I thought I would just mention that because I'm quite passionate about that. You can hear from the coaching that the people who succeed in life are the people who take responsibility. They accept that they have a role to play. And the people who fail are those who will point at everybody else around them and never take responsibility.
Now, I do also, I love that point you're raising, George, and definitely something I would emphasize our listeners to try and take on into their life. If we put it simply, action turns intention into reality, and that intention that we are trying to emphasize to our listeners is that of positivity. And while we're doing the self-reflection, as you articulated, George, I also wanted to emphasize that um, the uniqueness of individuals, you have to hold on to that uniqueness that you have, that authenticity that we've also said when you're developing your online streaming persona. The show, the contents you deliver should be individually unique and authentic. That should encourage self-acceptance, the application as well of the self-leadership principles that we've been discussing this evening. Applies to a diverse context, whether it's in a social environment, whether it's on your digital streaming aspect of life, whether it's in your personal life. Those diverse perspectives that you need to deal with must still accept that you are an individual. But here as well in Africa, that individual that we speak of is also part of a community. It's part of a whole. And we did touch on some aspects of that whole, where you've got your leadership structures in the community leadership, your family, uh, politicians, if that's even possible, your religious leaders. So there's a community. It's not necessarily you always on your own, but each person is unique, and that uniqueness should not be lost, especially when you're trying to develop yourself within a context of diverse environments. Um, Celebration of individual differences, exploring how your self leadership can be adapted to various personal and professional situations. And of course, then, as we were talking as well, how are you as an individual with your self leadership skills being developed, forming an importance in terms of the social responsibility as we're going on into the future? That's becoming more and more relevant and important, and doesn't matter if you're talking on a government on a corporate governance level, or whether talk about our digital online streaming content that we develop, which will be streamed to diverse cultures and all parts of the world. When you get to a point where you have thousands of people listening in on your content, you have to make sure that your social responsibility, your diversity aspects are taken care of. And
Right.
if you don't, then of course your shows are not going to last that long, because somebody will eventually either cut you down, or you'll be broadcasting just to yourself. Um, I think the aspect of individuality, George and Umpile, is something that one should always keep in mind in terms of their self leadership journey. You have any inputs in that aspect?
I see Maynard is on online. Maynard, would you like to comment?
I'm not sure if you can hear
Okay.
us.
Yeah, yeah, he probably isn't there. I believe there's been a storm. There was a storm here, but it's gone past now.
And I'm hoping that
Uh,
storm is not an inner storm in terms of disturbing your self leadership, George.
no, no. Today I took advice. I was laughing a little less. Shavish?
No, then our listeners are gonna think that because Sam is not here, we are not having fun anymore.
Listen, I'm mindful of the time, Davis.
Yes.
How do you want us to proceed now? Because I think we must knock off at past. Otherwise, our listeners won't be too happy with that.
Yes, no, that is fine. I think we have actually dealt with a lot of the aspects that we were wanting to share with our listeners. Of course, if they wanted further information, this module that we are discussing here tonight can be found on our website. Of course, we would want you to take a look at what other modules we do have, other areas of skills development. Kometsa, as we mentioned, is about sharing knowledge, sharing skills, helping communities develop. And these podcasts that we're generating now can be found at www.kometsaradiopodcast.com. Or if you want to look at our print media, you can go to www.kometsa-goc.com, and then you'll find a lot of our information about a lot of the material that we actually are generating and developing and sharing with our community, and not only our listeners out there. Um, just in terms of my key lesson learned tonight, my nuggets that I would say I received, and I wanted to emphasize what George had said earlier. Even though we are the so called experts in this space, we are continuously learning, and we're always researching and engaging with each other to also enrich the skills and knowledge that we've acquired, we are trying to share with our listeners out there. And tonight's show for me uh, says that self leadership is a lifelong journey, self discovery, growth, and evolution. It's about embracing your individuality, harnessing your unique strengths, and consistently striving to become the best version of yourself. And that's it from my side in terms of what I took from tonight's show. What about yourself, George?
Mm, mm. Yeah, as I said as we started, self leadership is really, really a powerful subject, and I hope our listeners gained value from tonight. And I also hope that they go back and reflect on how can I enhance my self leadership. What are the things that I can do? There's many articles around it, but it's a journey to grow and always become better. And for me, it's a statement that says, I never want to stagnate. You don't want to stagnate. You're always moving forward, 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 chasing new things and learning as you go. And learning that is, you make mistakes, smile, dust yourself up, get up, dust yourself up, move on. You have learned a lesson from it. You always find yourself in a situation where you will make a mistake. That's okay. The people who don't make mistakes are sitting in the house, lock their doors, and never move. They will never make a mistake, but you will not. Will make mistakes as you grow. So yeah, join us again next week as we touch on another subject. But thank you very much for being with us tonight. We really, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.